Well, slap my thighs and call me for dinner. I see a foe worth the killing, and lads beside me who are up to the mark. I can also feel an inspiring speech coming on. So, listen to me. Our French foes hold us in scant regard, lads. This is a mistake they often make, being arrogant and wine-sodden in equal measure. I fear that we will feel the lack of gunpowder on our side today. Our foes have an ample supply of heavily armored men. And now, say your last prayers. Put your trust in your fellows and in good steel, too. Then let us march to whatever God wills!
Oh, bother.
Well, slap my thighs and call me for dinner. I'm Yin Yang Total War, and as much as I would love to address that speech, today we're going to be talking about sieges. In fact, for the next few videos, we're going to be diving into sieges from each of the Total War games, or at least each of them that brought something new, starting with Medieval 2 and going all the way up to Warhammer 3. We're going to be talking about the features that made these games unique and how they compare to sieges today. We'll, hopefully by the end, combine them into something that could make sieges awesome for the next Total War. So, let's get started. Now, as you can probably guess from this flyover, my first point is going to be that of the multi-layered settlement. Now, if you're coming to the series from any of the games after Medieval 2, you might not have seen this before, so I'll explain. In Medieval 2, cities came in two different flavors. You had your civil settlements that made money and had a single wall, much in the same way that most Total War games develop their cities now. And then you had military settlements, which were your more castle-style layouts where you recruited armies and they would serve as a focal point for your national defense. What made these battles so much fun wasn't the fact that the AI was any smarter. Trust me, it's not. But what made these battles so much fun was the thought that had to go into them. In Total War, if you bring the wrong kinds of troops to the battle, you might lose. That's a given. But what if you bring the right kind of troops and use them at the wrong time? With multi-layered defenses, you might find yourself throwing expendable troops into the meat grinder, only to find that you have hardly anything left to make progress once you get over the first wall. On the other hand, if you commit your elite troops to the fight immediately, they might be chewed up and worn down by thereby limiting their effectiveness in the battle. You might throw all of your troops at the wall at the same time. This is common in Warhammer. However, if you do so without the cover of siege towers or returning artillery fire, you might find your soldiers riddled with holes before they even step foot into the city. Now, you can see as this battle progresses that a lot of it plays out much like any other Total War, approaching the walls, breaking down the gate, storming the city. But what you don't get out of those Total Wars, or at least all of them, is a sense that these soldiers care if they lose or not. Upon entering the settlement, my billmen were nearly ambushed by responding spearmen, resulting in the loss of 2 whole units, which could have been even worse if not for the walls collapsing and my knights pouring in. Plus, a poorly aimed trebuchet shot a hole in some poor guy's house. Sorry about that, bud. Now, as I was saying, the first layer of a multi-layered settlement is going to be much like what we have in current Total Wars. In modern Total Wars, the enemy will fight you for that wall, but once that fight is over, either most of the troops are wiped out, or they will continue to fight you for every inch of territory until they are whittled down to nothing. But this is where Medieval 2 truly shines. As you can see, the enemy army is gone, and while there are many bodies on the ground, this battle is far from over. Looking past the walls, you can see the French army is gathered in the next layer of the settlement, not only in the streets but also on the bastions. This isn't an army that is ready to admit defeat, but one that wants to use its defenses to its own advantage. The defender's reset then forces the attack to do a reset of its own. Questions like, do I go back for that ram? Which troops do I use to take these ladders? And did I save enough artillery shells to get through this wall? Are calculations that all have to be made when deciding how to approach this next layer of defense.
Now, this brings us to the next point in our discussion, the fallback. As you can see, my forces are overcoming the second wall both with ladders and artillery. Seeing this, the French army do the only sensible thing, which is to mount an organized retreat into the citadel itself. Are all their troops going to make it? Of course not. In fact, you could argue that the spearmen fighting me for the wall are performing a rearguard action. Again, does this mean that the AI was smarter back then? Well, no. But it was programmed to recognize an algorithm that added up events like points. Walls mounted, we can hold them. Gate broken, kill them at a choke point. Artillery breaking the walls, oh shit, it's time to go. And any combination of these events could trigger that fallback behavior and made these battles really feel more involved. Of course, seeing all these forces rout brings attention to a mechanic that I would advocate needs to return. That, of course, being retreating inwards instead of outward. What I mean by this is, when defending a settlement, one that is likely home for the defenders, it makes no sense to run towards the enemy or out into the fields where raiders might catch you, but rather to run towards the city center and defend it to your last breath. Although, another feature could be surrendering it peacefully, but that is something that we will talk about in a later video. As this battle draws to a close, I want to touch on 3 points that I think should be prominent when fighting a siege. The first one is going to be, as you can see here, the tactical sally. As you can see, I foolishly left my archers unprotected in front of the enemy gate, holding my knights in reserve away from enemy counterfire. And while the AI could, and probably should, have attacked my helpless bowmen, they instead went for a more valuable target in the form of my infantry that were almost routed due to being attacked while transitioning up a wall. This almost spelled doom for my forces and is a behavior that the AI should be programmed to do when you fail to plan adequately. The next feature I think could fix our gate bug issue. Well, for one, we're going to have to stop letting troops attack gates, but if your warriors cross through the gate like they are here, it can't close until you are pushed out. This could stop units from being cut in half when it doesn't make any sense, and create a sense of dread when the enemy army breaks through at a point that you weren't expecting. You know, that moment where you realize you done goofed. The final mechanic that I think needs a return is one that I call desperate defense. When you have nowhere else to go and what's left of your men will put everything on the line to hold that final square. It doesn't stop you from capturing the square, mind you, if your forces overwhelm the enemy within their own walls, but it does keep them from giving up and running away and can lead to unexpected events like Sir Thigh Slapper not getting to have his coveted dinner. As we bring low the final defenders, I would ask you for your thoughts. Do you find some of these mechanics to be annoying or useless in modern Total War? Or is there more mechanics that I missed? Let me know down in the comments section below, and as always, to all my friends wherever you are, good morning, good evening, and good night. I'll see you next time.